Hey everyone, Yasin here, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to design appealing faces. So, the first thing I have to say is that if you are someone who only likes to draw realistic faces and you want them to look like, real people, this video isn't for you. It's more for people who want to know how to draw stylized or exaggerated faces, which is something that I like to do a lot. So, for most people, when learning how to draw faces, we're taught this thing, and I mean, I started this way too, and have also made tutorials on this. You start with like your basic head, whether you start with an oval or sort of a circle or ellipse, and then I don't know, this triangular shape. It's usually a place we all start at, and we learn a very generic head. So in this, the eyes go halfway. And if you're someone who hasn't learned this, it's probably important to learn, I would say. It gives you an understanding of what people look like more. So the first thing is that we tend to learn is that from the top of the head to the bottom of the chin, halfway is roughly where the eye line is. And then between the eyes and the chin, halfway is where the nose goes. And I mean, some of these guides vary from one person to another, and the reason is because heads vary. This isn't real proportions. It's just a generic proportion. So I mean, okay, so we get the eyes about halfway, nose, and then some people say the mouth is halfway from the nose to the chin. Other people say it's like you divide it into three, and on the top third is the mouth line, and then the bottom of the chin is somewhere a bit between the mouth line and the bottom, and that second third, which is like the chin area. And then your eyes, kind of go in this spot. You have an eye in between. You have your eyebrows, and between the eyebrows and the nose is, like, if you curve around, then you kind of get where the ears are. And then either halfway from this point or a bit like up to this, which is another half, you get the hairline. So for girls it tends to be higher, for guys it tends to be lower. But roughly you get something that looks like this, which is a generic head. And I call these canonical proportions. So canonical proportions, just meaning like you have a canon, you have a fixed thing that you want to, not a canon like those canons, but like a canon. A canon is in like a guide, like hey, I'm this tall, I'm this many heads tall, and all that stuff. And these are very generic. And this is kind of what I feel doesn't really help too much. I mean, it does in the beginning, but not really for creating like interesting looking or cool looking characters. It only helps for creating kind of average looking characters, and also for getting a base. So you kind of know, for instance, like, well, here's where the eyes are supposed to go, about halfway. So I'm gonna alter that. Or if I look at this person, how do they compare to this generic? So this gives you like just a standard so that you can judge everyone else by it. Like, oh, okay, so hey, I want to know if this character, this guy I'm looking at maybe, or a character you're drawing, has like a thick neck. Well, if the neck is supposed to be on a generic head, it's more like this, then thick probably is bigger. So, maybe like this. So then you give them that neck and you say, well, this character has a thick neck. This character has a very a small nose. So maybe you'll raise the nose or something. But it's all compared to this generic. But although that's useful, I prefer, or actually what I've been learning or teaching myself, and what I prefer is this. It's a different type of thing. Instead of canonical proportions, it's anatomical relationships. It's judging things based on their anatomy and not so much on these proportions. So let's just keep the nose where it was. So I guess I'll walk you through what it's like to use these. So let's say I was doing a face and I was using the basic generic Canon. I would say, well, where is the nose? Well, here's the eye line, nose is halfway. Okay, where, like, how wide is the eye? Well, it's got to be the same width. Or how wide is the nose? Well, it's the same width as the eye. So that's how wide the nose is. And then you've got half an eye space between this eye and the side of the face. So that's kind of how you build. With the anatomical one, what you do instead is you build off things like this. Okay, so the nose is kind of, it's between these 2 points somewhere, but really what I think about is like the nasal cavity. I think of the eye sockets more. So the nose is in between the eye sockets, and you've got like this part that, like if I'm drawing a skull anyway, got like this part that comes around. You've got a cheek here, and then this eyebrow ridge. You've got this separating the temple area. You've got, kind of can imply that cheek as it turns, and your nose is somewhere in here. But I'm really just working off these shapes. So you can see I've kind of got this shape, right? This skull shape. I can build that any way I want. So let's just do that. Oh, one more thing. Not one more thing. There's a bunch of little tricks to learn, well, where does everything go? But it's more based on relationships between one thing and another and fitting them into like this puzzle. So for instance, usually, and this isn't always the case, but it's a case I've been using a lot, and that's kind of how this is. It's kind of not an exact science. It's more try it out, screw around with it, see what you like, see what you don't. I've noticed that this part of the jaw, where it turns, kind of lines up with the mouth. And that kind of makes sense because, you know, your jaw's got to open and close. So you kind of view these types of relationships where, like, you can have your eyes closer together if you want, but that's going to mean that the nose is going to be more narrow. So that's how you treat it. So, for instance, let's just make a face, okay? All right. So I'll make it like a 3/4 face. I'm going to put the eyes wherever I want. Let's just say they're really high up, okay? So I'm going to have eyes here. All right. So what I need to know is not necessarily, you know, well, how tall and measure anything like that. No. I can put the features wherever I want, really. You can say, well, the nose is way up here, the mouth is way down here. But what I do need to know is the anatomy. So here we had like the front of the skull. This part. I'll just make this one white, the skull one, so it's easier to differentiate. All right, so we have like the skull guy. All right, so this part of the eye socket, well, we can put that here, right? So the eye socket's going to stay the same in terms of not placement, but like the concept of it. Like you need an eye socket, okay, and you need a nose bridge. So here's a nose bridge. You can make the nose like end here. You have nostrils, and so you can put those there. And then your mouth is way down here. Okay, so what that means by having the mouth way down here is it means this area is going to be really long. So you're stretching that. But this part is still going to be close to the, like this cheekbone. is still going to be closer to the eye socket. So we keep that up here and we extend this part. So I'm extending all the portions, but the proportion, or rather the relationships are still in place. Not like measuring relationships, but anatomical relationships, right? So here's the bottom of the chin. And then remember I mentioned that the mouth is kind of opposite to this turning thing. So I can make that turning jaw point right here kind of still opposite of the mouth. And then I can go up. And then the ear being between the eyebrow and the nose, that's kind of more of an anatomy thing as well. So I can maintain that. I can just make the ear between the eyebrow and the nose, and the eyebrow sits on this eye socket area. So I can put that in. And then have like an ear here and get the side of the face in. Can put in where the eyes would be. And maybe like a long, skinny neck. And a hairline, right? So like the hairline is not halfway down, or I mean, it's not halfway between the top of the head and the eyebrows or anything like that. It's like super up here. I mean, in relation to the top of the head, because maybe it is sort of, not halfway, but close. But anyway, it's still, I mean, to me, it kind of looks okay. Kind of looks like, obviously it's exaggerated, but it's not really wrong. I feel like most of the components are still there. And I can kind of highlight this. This is something you would do in anatomy as well, is you can just sort of see how you can make your anatomy skewed any way you want, but the relationships are the same. So here's the forehead area on this guy. Here's the same area on this guy. So you're thinking of like, oh, this area or this shape exists. Kind of goes into, like, you can think of that part too. Then we have like this part, which is this part. We have this part, which is this part. This is here, and this is here. So all the parts are there. It's just their size is completely different, right? You have this, and you have this, this, and this. You have this whole cheek area. And yeah, same thing here. So it's just learning all this. And I mean, it's not easy. I don't mean to make it sound super easy, because it's still not easy. You have to learn all these components. But once you know them, you can play around with them a lot. And that's really fun, I think, is just playing with all this. So here's a side plane, here's a side plane. It's rolling into a top plane. So here's a top plane of the head. Here's a top plane of the head. All right. So it's something that's like, oh, cool. But maybe you don't really want to create like this type of head. Maybe you think, well, that's all well and good, but it kind of looks ugly. Well, sure, but it's like you can move this any which way you want, so it doesn't really matter. So I was doing this study a while back of this artist I like called Blade Buredo, and he has like characters with this proportion. I think they look fine. They look cute and fine and stylized and cool and stuff. And I thought, well, what if I studied that? What if I broke it down? What does this actually look like? Compared to something like that you may find in a how to draw anime book, or, you know, even a how to draw the human head book. And so I broke it down. And I looked at, here's a head proportion between a normal head and what he has. Like more of a normal head would be this, and what he has is like this. So you can see the eyes. If we go from the top of the head to the bottom of the chin, halfway is here. That's nowhere near where the eyes are. And then the eyebrows get raised. The head is just humongous, like the cranium. All this area. It's huge compared to what it would be, which is like you go from this to that. And then your entire features and everything are down here. Now the eyes are way bigger. See, the eyes actually only take up about that much space, but in this case they take up about that much space. So it's a very, very exaggerated proportion. When I look at like the body, it's a bit weird, but in context with everything else, with the hair that makes up for this shape and it brings things together, with the colors, which are actually really subtle. So I looked at the colors, and I also looked at the values and like how close these are. They're really close, these colors. If I just show you on a color picker, here's the eyes, for instance. That's the brightest part, which is a highlight. But then these parts, like, they're not that dark or light. I mean, they're pretty light. They're not that dark. With the hair, this is the hair in the light. This is like the average tone of the hair, and this is the hair in the shadow, which is like, if you think of shadow, you're probably usually thinking around here, but it's way up there. So again, it doesn't matter that your drawing is like one thing or another, that the eyes are here or there. It's just what looks good to you. That's really the main rule, is what looks good to you. And that's how you should design these things. So when I talked about how to, like, okay, so now we kind of have the relationships. I guess I should just go through the relationships in a front view and a side view, because that's good to know. And I'll show you a few tips that I use. So this is not the gospel. This is not me telling you this is exactly what you need to know. This is me telling you, I like this. This is what I've kind of used. It works and it's cool. And here I'm going to show you it. See what you like, what you don't. Use what you like. Get rid of what you don't. And anyway, yeah. So front view, I kind of think of it still like this shape. Stick a neck on there. I always stick necks on my heads. If you're not, I would recommend it. It grounds your head. You don't just want a floating head. It's the same for any body part. Like if you're going to do a hand study, for instance, you draw a hand, don't just leave it with the hand. Get the wrist in there as well. It's always important to draw these connecting parts, because I showed you how, like, oh, the eye sockets, and then that connects with the, like, between the eye sockets, where you have the nose, and then above you get the eyebrows, like the brow ridge. And then you have the mouth. Again, it doesn't really matter if you put the mouth way up high, if you put the mouth really low. What matters more, if I put the mouth really high, for instance, like that, is that I have to adjust the jaw so that the jaw opens properly. So I'll just raise the jaw, and then that mouth works. So again, it really doesn't matter too much where these things go exactly, so long as they're in the right spot with things around them. So I'm gonna think of the front plane and the side plane, ears around here. And I can just work with this one with the mouth super high. That's fine. Let's just make it more crazy. Let's pull the hairline really like this widow's peak, just super extreme though. I mean, I'm sure there are people who look like this, so it's not super extreme. It's very normal, but just, you know, it's normal and different. It's fine. You know, nothing's wrong with you if you look like this at all. All right, so let's do a side view now. So what I like to do with the side view is actually build it like this first, like a very basic, I don't know what you'd call this shape. but it's a very organic shape. And keep the ears about kind of halfway in the middle of this, but kind of a bit to the side. So if you drew a halfway line from the front here to the back, maybe a bit on the inside. But again, it's not so important about the measurements per se. It's more everything has to fit. And in order to make things fit, it often requires that things have to be a certain size. For instance, well, if the ear is between the eyebrow and the nose, it kind of has to be like this size. Otherwise, I have to move the nose. But if I move the nose, then the ear gets bigger. So, anyway. All right. So what I think of are things like this. Okay, so from the bottom of the chin here, from this part, to, I guess, this part where it connects to the ear, if I drew a line about halfway is usually where I put the necks. It's not necessary that you do this. It's just, it kind of works. Kind of works for an appealing thing. And then you can always play around. You can always screw around and say, well, no, I want my chin like here, or I want it way back here. But if you put it around here, it's not going to look wrong. I guess that's the thing. Yeah. It's still going to look good. It's still going to look appealing. And that's what this lesson was about, right? How to create appealing faces, not how to create correct faces. So that's something. So start with this rough shape. How can we think of it? Maybe think of it like sort of like you have the letter D, right? But then you stretch it a bit, bring this part down, make it more like this, I guess, this shape. Triangle shape, sailboat shape. Could think of it like a sailboat. I don't know, whatever method works for you, that's how to think of it, but it's just this shape. Like, that's the important thing. I usually start with like that shape. Okay, and then that's a neck, is like halfway between this point and this point. It's roughly where I have the neck. Another way to do it, which is really good as well, is to block out the whole head shape. And this is something, I believe I learned it from a Doxy tutorial. Doxy, he gets the credit. Look him up. He's very good. He does very good tutorials, but they're almost all of them are not safe for work or for kids. Not safe for kids. Nusfuck. So they're all Nusfo and Nusf. Anyway. Okay, so you get this basic head shape, right? I just blocked in roughly where the head is. So let's make a neck for this person. So what you do is you just ignore the whole drawing out. Don't need it. Just treat this like its own little thing, its own little shape. Let's just fill this shape in just to make it more that it's a shape. Okay, we have this like balloon. Just imagine you have a balloon and it's very tilted, right? All right, so in the middle of this balloon, where would you say the middle is? If you had to find the middle. Like, obviously it's not like perfectly centered, but you know, roughly about there is the middle of the balloon, right? So from this point, you draw a line straight down, or wherever. You can draw a line this way, or this way. So you draw a line, then you put two, like, equal space on either side of this. So you've got this much space, as long as it's equal. And that's it. And that's roughly where your neck goes. So this way you can find out good, I mean, the way I did it is I made my line more like this, and then equal, and that's, you know, where your neck goes. So that's another way of doing it, is to think of it that way. But we're not really thinking about measurements or specific, like, count 1, 2, or divide it in half, and then divide it in a third, and divide it in 1/7, and, you know, split that in 2, and carry the 4. It's more just get the shape, and then roughly, you know, that's where the neck goes. And you can tilt it, because the neck is tilted, so you can do something more like this. That's fine. Still comes out from halfway between this and this. So And that's like the neck. And then, so the nose is, you know, between the eye and the eyebrow and the, like the bottom of the ear is where the nose level starts, and the top is where the eyebrow is. So roughly in this spot. So we get this guy's super tall mouth, so we can just do that. Big mouth. Now here's a very important measurement thing. Not measurement, landmark. Landmarks. I probably should have said drawing with landmarks. Anyway, anatomical relationships. Doesn't matter what you call it. But this one's super important. And it's the cheek. So this is something you don't really see much on this front view. But it's this area here. Very, very, very important area. So the middle of it is like right here. Right here. Kind of the middle of that cheek. And that is what we see on a side view. Now, why is it so important? Well, the reason it's so important is because this tells you where the eye socket goes. Like the eye socket can't be, it can't be here, for instance, because the cheek is here. So it's got to be in this area, right? And it kind of creates this rhythm. The other thing it tells us is we can't put the mouth here. Why? Because it crossed over the cheek. And like, if the mouth wants to open more, the cheek has to move aside, which is why you get that, like that Mickey Mouse type of smile line. Because the cheek has to move, so the mouth has room, right? So if the mouth was smiling maybe this much, because that other is very big. So we go like this. Now we have room for the mouth. So the cheek does move, so that's useful, but this is very important. Also tells us that the nose can't be, like the nostril can't be here, for instance, because that's intruding into the cheek's space. So you got to keep your nose within this area, your eye within this area, and then it's a very, very useful marker. Here's another important one. The eyebrow in a side view. This is a lot of knowledge at once. I'm sorry if this is overwhelming. The reason I haven't been making tutorials for a while, and I've just been learning and learning and learning and trying to figure stuff out on my own. And I ended up with a lot of knowledge that I don't know exactly how to convey. But it's all related. It's all interconnected. So anyway, so with the eyebrow, it curves around and it points to the eyelash. Like, okay, let's just make a bigger eyebrow. Here's an eyebrow in a side view, right? This part points to the eyelash, the top lashes, and how they go down. Like you can kind of combine it. You can erase this part, and it goes woof, like that. Because this part of the eyebrow is lower than this part. And this part is usually what we see here. So this is the middle of the eye, and in the middle of the eye here is usually what we see. And then this part is going down, which is going down this way, and then it sort of stops around here, and therefore we get this thing where you get an eyeball, and you get a side view, and you get an eyebrow that goes and it points there. And that's super useful, right? Same with this, like you can draw a line, which I do, and I always viewed it like a style thing because I was the only one who I knew was doing it, and it just helps me connect this part to the eyebrow, and it lets me know where the eyebrow stops or starts, however you want to think of it, like this squiggle line. So see, you have this like squiggly thing that forms. That's useful. All right. Something else that's useful is this relationship between, you have like a relationship between the masseter muscle, I think it's called. It's like this jaw muscle and this part of the face. It's not super important, but it's something. What else? Oh, the back of the cranium kind of turns like this, and that usually lines up often anyway with the, like where this starts to turn. It lines up with the eye, which is, see, here's the eye, kind of go back, then you get the back of the cranium, then you go down, so sort of in this area. I've seen it a bit lower, a bit higher, but generally it checks out, kind of lines up there. So that's another good one to note. The back of the neck is much shorter than the front. The front is like, stops down here, the back is way up here. A good way to think about this is just collars. Think about a shirt collar. You think of that, you'll be able to understand this idea more easily, how it's high at the back, low at the front. In fact, it tends to get bigger at the front like that. So that's another important thing. Okay, but this is all about how to create appealing characters. So these are just the relationships that you need to create the appealing characters. I think that's most of them. So yeah, like those are important relationships. Then in terms of creating a character, how'd you do it? Well, something I like to do is not stick to a very boring shape. So you might think of, well, I've talked about shapes before, and I talked about applying them to characters. So like, oh, you have your triangles, your circles, your squares, and something I've seen a lot is characters that are, you know, based off a triangle. It's like, okay, so you put the eyes, the nose, wherever you want them, but you base it off a triangle and create a triangle person. That's okay, that's pretty appealing. I mean, that does help create appealing characters, and if you're new to character design or new to drawing it, this is a really nice way of drawing and having a character that looks pretty unique. So they're not just, you know, I mean, it takes about the same amount of skill as drawing a smiley face. It's just, hey, it's in a triangle, so it's more interesting. It's got its own personality. But what I like to do is not really think purely as like this is a triangle, but rather to think of these shapes as kind of like primary colors. So, you know, the primary colors are red and, well, it depends. You could go red, green, blue. You could go cyan, magenta, and yellow. You could have red, yellow, blue, you know, but you get, these are the primaries, and then out of these, like, you can get red and green, and then mix an in-between color, right? So these would be secondaries because they're mixed from two primaries. And you can do the same thing with shapes. So here is a primary shape, not a square. Here is another primary shape, circle. So now we can get like a boxy shape, which is rounded, but it's still boxy. And so, is it a circle? No. Is it a square? No. Somewhere in between. Do the same thing for, yeah, like a triangle. You can make it more boxy. So, let's see. I don't know. Maybe a bit more like that. I added a curve, so this is actually, I guess when you add a triangle, you get tertiary shapes, because it's very hard to make a boxy triangle. I never thought about that before. But you could do something like this. I guess that would be a boxy triangle. Still triangular and still kind of square. But yeah, if you combine 3, box plus triangle plus circle, you get tertiary shapes, which are like shapes like this. I guess. It's like, it's kind of boxy, but it's kind of triangular, and it's kind of circular, and these are kind of the ones I use. And I don't really think about it too much. I just do like shapes like this or this. And these are shapes that I find useful in making appealing characters. So the reason is they're very organic, and second of all, they have, I don't know, you can just try it, and they have things to them that I can kind of see faces in all of them, and some of them I see multiple ones. Like this one, I see a face kind of looking up here, but I could also see, you know, maybe the nose is here, and these are the eyes. So something more like that, or, I mean, it doesn't really matter, but I like to create interesting shapes first and then build characters from it. And at first, I spent a lot of time just making random shapes, but after a while you start to internalize these and you learn what the shape is going to turn into, or at least how to use the shape. So for instance, at first maybe I just do like a shape like this, and it's like, I don't know, I just want to create a character, and I make a random shape. Okay, then I look at that shape and I think, well, where would the eyes go? See, if I was doing a very boring, generic, canonical proportion, I guess I would go halfway for the eyes here, and it's still going to look interesting. Like, it's still interesting as a thing, but I tend not to do that. I just look at it and I sort of think about not eyes on a line, but like eye sockets. And yeah, the line is there to make sure these things line up, but they don't have to be the same size. Like this eye socket's bigger than this one. And that's going to create like a sense of perspective. I just put the nose, let's say I put the nose here. Maybe I have the mouth like here. Maybe it's a really small mouth, and it's just kind of smiling like this. And this is kind of how I make appealing characters, is I think about things like this, like just think about the shape. And I think about how does one shape flow into another, and how do you maintain those initial relationships, right? Like that cheek thing I talked about, it's like right here. You don't have to draw them out, but you do have to sort of feel them out and know where they go. The eyebrow going around, kind of curving in, you know, you can put those there. You can put a little, give him a chin like that. It's funny. Could give him a chin like this. You know. And you can make a bunch of different shapes with just these basic, with the basic knowledge of how a face works. When it comes to bodies, which I think I'll cover in a different tutorial, but it's just, you know, you combine the shapes. You think about, oh, well, maybe his arms are down here. And there, I've got like a pretty interesting shape. I'm not thinking about things like symmetry too much. I'm not thinking about things like being correct. I'm just thinking about, you know, the anatomy and just having fun, playing around. Now you can use appeal and understanding to create certain types of characters. So like this character is kind of funny and goofy looking, but let's say I wanted to create a character that was cute, right? So would I just create a random shape? I mean, I could. That's fine. Let's just do this. Let's make this into a cute character. Okay, I'm just going to lower the opacity and work on a layer above so I have that original shape. So something to note with cute characters are big eyes, small nose, small mouth usually, but can be big. I mean, any of these can be screwed around. You still can have tiny eyes and have a cute character. Like I could do this, and then this, and it's still pretty cute. Right? But anyway, usually these are components, and then a lot of space for the cranium. I mean, you saw that blade study I did, right? Tons of space for the cranium. So now let's just do that. Let's make eye sockets first. Make a little nose. I'll make the nose really close to the eyes. I'll make a mouth like here. And I'm going to push the cheek out quite a lot. maybe more like lower, and give a lot of space for this area, because this area is just this area. I just expanded it to that because I have to, because you have an eyebrow and you have an eyeball, and that fits within an eye socket, and you have the nose, and you have a cheekbone here, and you have an eyebrow ridge, top of a cranium. And so the same thing is true here. See, we have an eyebrow, we have this part, we have the cheek here, top of the eyebrow ridge here, top of the cranium there. So anyway, I'm going to make thick upper lashes. Thick lashes. And I'm going to actually use like a different shape for the eye. I don't want to use like a perfectly round shape like this. Don't want to do that. So what I'm doing is I'm choosing to use shapes that aren't exactly accurate. Like maybe that's the eye, and I use more of a boxy shape. Still looks good though. I mean, you could do this. This is kind of a typical eye where you have the highlight across, you have it sort of lightened up, and then kind of get that. It's pretty typical. So I could do that. I could do, you know, maybe I'll do something like this, which suggests, it suggests a couple of things. So what this is, and it's a very common anime eye. You've probably seen it a bunch of times. But what it suggests on a real eye is this. So you have the pupil here, and you have a shadow here that is cast from the eyelid and eyelashes. And that shadow actually goes across the eye. So all this is more in shadow. So it's kind of like that. Get a shadow across, you get the eyelid, and then, so what happens in this style is you take this part of the shadow, you take this part of the shadow, you don't worry about this too much, and you combine it with the pupil, and now you have this shape. So anime, to me, the way I see it, is based on reality and played around with, but in actually a very specific way. It's not random. And so I have a lot of respect for anime done well. I have no respect for people who just don't learn this. And I mean, I guess it's still hard to do this, but I have less respect for people who don't base it on reality and sort of don't really know what these things are, but just copy them. Like, you'll look at this and you'll just, oh, well, let me create an eye, and oh, I notice there's this line and whatever. It's like, it's cooler if you just learn like the way the head is built, and then you can make it anything you want. So yeah, so that's one thing. So here we've got a more cute face, and just gonna build it because there's too many lines. So we have a more cute face, and it has certain components. So it has a much larger area of the eye, including the entire eye socket. Like, the eye socket itself is humongous. It's like that big. Then I'll just draw a skull. Anyway, yeah. So eye socket's here, here, huge eye socket. Tiny nose. So the nose is like this, and the mouth is like this, and the bottom is like this. I mean, it even looks like a cute little skeleton, right? It's like a child skeleton. That's not cute. That's sad. But, yeah, these are the components that I'm thinking of when I do this face. So instead of just stopping with the bone, let's give him very fat cheeks, big eyes, and a small nose. Now with the nose, some people put them high like this, which is something I like to do. Or you can put it low, you can put it down here and it'll still look kind of cute. It'll just be a bit of a different face. So make a face like this. Little eyes. I'm not gonna make things like too perfect. Like I'm not gonna make the eyeball or the iris a perfect circle like this. It's kind of more like this. It's one of those secondary shapes. It's not quite a square, it's not quite a circle, it's sort of in between. And using these types of shapes, these more organic, more interesting shapes, makes more interesting characters, because hey, they're more interesting shapes. It's like you build with something interesting and you get something interesting. You build with something cool and you get something cool. All right. Okay, so here's a nose and a little mouth. And I mean, ideas like cute are all relative. Most people find babies cute, and so these are proportions you would often find in a baby. And so they register as cute to most people, but not everyone thinks they're cute, so I mean, do what you think is cute. But yeah, you can play around with things like noses a lot. Blush is like a super easy way to make something look more cute. And then when it comes to things looking strong, by contrast, still appealing, but strong. Okay, so how are we going to do that? Well, it uses different things, different concepts. So squares are strong shapes. So like circles are cute, harmless shapes, soft, you could say. Triangles are intense, dangerous, you know, like you could sit on one and that would hurt. Dangerous. They're exciting. Squares are stable, they're strong, they are tough. It's kind of a synonym. Boring, kind of. You don't have, I mean, all of these can be boring except for triangles. They're always cool. That's a joke. Nothing is always anything. But anyway, so we want like strong. So probably combining these two would work better than having a lot of round shapes. So I can do that. I can start a character. I'm not going to start it with a square like this. That would be too boring. I'm going to start it with a square like this. All right. That's exciting. All right, so the other thing is, give the character like a bigger chin, tends to work. Let's have a big chin, square, get the ear, smaller cranium, eyes, let's make them very thin. Like not, remember how the baby had that huge, like this part of the face was really big for the eyes. In this case, we're gonna shrink it to like that. The nose can be whatever. I'm going to make it pretty short. And then the mouth, I'm going to make it about like that. So we get a lot of chin, a little bit of this. Probably this is about the same as that or close. And then small eyes. I'm going to make bigger eyebrows, like the mean. Focus on like the jaw. Got to make the jaw part opposite the mouth. So more like that. And have like a big traps and stuff. All right, so that's like the basic frame that we're working with. And I'm gonna build that shape that I originally had, that kind of sailboaty D shape. I can do this. And let's just make this, like, lower the opacity so I can build on it. So smaller ears, big jaw. Let's make like a chiseled cheekbone, maybe like a broken nose, Again, you don't have to be too perfect with these things. Like the eyebrows, like really, really intense. Shrink those eyes even more. We just got like very, very thin eyes. They're almost like more like lines than circles, if you think about it, right? Can make this indicating this cheekbone going down and then sort of connecting with this masseter muscle. Can make like sort of frowny things. A lot of frown lines. Much smaller cranium. See, this is a tiny cranium. I mean, in terms of real estate, you're basically saying, here's a face, and the eyes go way up here, the nose goes way here, the mouth is like here, and this is all the forehead he gets, and all the chin is like here. So, I mean, on a different face, it could just look very, very comical. But in this, it kind of looks badass, right? Really thinking about negative shape here. How much I made the hairline even smaller so I could emphasize this, right? Let's give him like some, like a beard, or just like a 5 o'clock shadow, where he's just kind of grizzly, right? And then here in the back, and connect to that big neck, big, powerful. So here we end up with like a much more tough character, but it's not using those traditional generic proportions at all. If I was, it wouldn't look this dramatic. And I think really good artists, the ones that you look at and you just don't know how they do something, tend to break the rules more. And I've seen a lot of like Western artists try to do anime, and they're getting much better at it. But when I was growing up, we had examples like, I don't know, we had like books like Christopher Hart and other books like that, which I personally didn't feel like they captured the aesthetic of anime stuff. And I think it's because people in the West are much more likely to stick to realistic proportions. Unless you're talking about Disney, or like French people are very good at playing around with this. But there's much more of a tendency, especially I guess in North America, to stick to something a lot more realistic and not to push it to like the level that like Blade would with this stuff. It's much more of an Asian sensibility to be able to push it that far. Whereas in the West, we tend to want to make things make sense more. So, I mean, that's just an observation, but I think people are getting better. Maybe because we're watching anime from a younger age, but just understanding that aesthetic, that it doesn't have to be correct, it just has to look cool, and that all these things mean something. So, I mean, making the mouth even thinner could make him even more tough looking. Yeah, it works. Maybe some like wrinkles around the eye, and then of course let's make the eyebrows even thicker. Let's give him a bit of a shadow in the eyes, like his. So now we're getting like some like tough character, right? And so again, it's just playing around with things, understanding what makes something look tough, and then using that to build an appealing shape. What about like pretty, attractive? This works for both guys and girls. But I mean, again, it really depends. But usually things like, again, the lashes being very strong helps. The eyes can actually be big or small, because you could have eyes that are very like thin like this and still have them look attractive. Noses are usually kind of diminished, so you're not going to outline them too much. You're not going to draw too much attention to them. The eyebrows tend to be a bit higher, but not always. Again, really depends. Mostly, I think it's just the eyes, smaller, like bigger eyes, smaller nose, make it even smaller, probably raise it a bit. Smaller mouth. Fairly large cranium, depends, again, how big you want it. And then, I guess, smaller ears, and then hair, right? And then blush. So these are things you can do to create just appealing characters. Not a huge fan of that. I'm gonna shrink the eye a lot. I like actually shrinking this part of the eye and having more space here. Tends to look good. So yeah, that's a sort of a pretty face, right? And the hair can do whatever. I don't know. I tend to just do anything when it comes to hair. But yeah, things like this create appealing characters that are sort of pretty. It's kind of looking a little bit like a Sailor Moon type thing. I don't remember what she looks like. Something like this, with like circles on her head. I don't remember. Anyway, so yeah. So mostly, I guess, asymmetry is huge. Asymmetry. Playing with like secondary and tertiary shapes. So those are shapes made from 2 or 3 primary shapes. And then sort of the feeling you're going for. For instance, do you want something to look cool, something to look scary, something to look cute? So having all these really helps. So let's just make a character. I'll make 2 characters. Okay, so first I'll ignore this. I'll still use shapes. I'll make like a character, and you can figure out which one you like better. Okay, and then just a basic character. Okay, so circle eyes. This is gonna look pretty appealing, but all right. So now I'll try and make a shape, not symmetrical, but still sort of square. I'm gonna actually tilt these circles, make them a bit more interesting. Bring the nose like up here, and the mouth like, and that's too crazy. Maybe here. Anyway, still, it feels like this has a lot more style to it, a lot more oomph. I don't know, and so that's why I like starting with like shapes that are just random, and then like a good exercise is just put down, like make faces out of these shapes. But I think it really helps to know the anatomy. So you're not going to escape fundamentals. You just have to use different fundamentals. Like instead of relying on measuring and rulers and guidelines and stuff, you might still use guidelines just to make sure the angle of your eyes are kind of working, but you're using a lot more just organic stuff, organic shapes, things that kind of flow from one thing into another, and building off that. So yeah, that's how to create appealing faces. There's a lot to it, and I can't really explain as much as I need to, because so much of this needs to be learned through mileage of just drawing. But hopefully it gives you some ideas about what you can do, and also, if nothing else, sort of break free from this. I have to draw a head, so I'm going to measure this, especially people who are starting out kind of do this too much with the measurements. I guess because it gives you a success. Like if you follow all these measurements and directions, you will get a face that looks probably better than you might do if you didn't know anything and you're trying to draw anime and you just make big eyes and big eyelashes and a pointy nose and a mouth and a pointy chin. Right? Kind of an interesting character. Anyway, so yeah, I hope you try it out, at least consider it, and I really hope this helps, and thanks for watching.